It was a fortress that should have fallen in a week. Instead, it endured for 1,470 days. A tiny garrison of just over 7,000 British and Hanoverian troops stared down the combined might of France and Spain's 60,000-strong army. They were starved, abandoned, and hammered by the greatest artillery bombardment the world had ever seen. But they refused to break. This is the story of the fatal mistake made by two of the world's great empires, and the secret weapon, forged in the heart of a mountain, that turned a forgotten outpost into the eternal symbol of British defiance. The story of the Battle of the Nile begins not with the clash of cannons, but with a desperate, agonizing chase across the vast emptiness of the Mediterranean. For 2 long months, Nelson, aboard his flagship HMS Vanguard, had hunted the French. He had been given command of a powerful squadron with one all-consuming mission: find Napoleon's armada and destroy it. But the Mediterranean is wide, and Nelson, to his eternal frustration, had no frigates, the fast scouting ships that served as the eyes of the fleet. He was sailing blind. His search was a masterpiece of deduction and instinct, but it was also plagued by misfortune. At one point, a fierce gale dismasted his flagship, scattering his ships and allowing the French, just a few miles away, to slip past him unseen. While Nelson searched, Napoleon struck. His massive invasion force, consisting of warships, transports, and thousands of soldiers, had sailed from Toulon, captured the island of Malta, and landed in Egypt. By late July, Napoleon had defeated the Mamluk rulers at the Battle of the Pyramids and secured Cairo. His grand vision was taking shape: to establish a French presence in the east, threaten British India, and build a new empire. The key to this entire enterprise was his fleet, commanded by Vice Admiral Francois-Paul Brueys. Brueys was tasked with protecting the army's supply lines and ensuring its connection to France remained unbroken. After disembarking the army, Brueys moved his 13 ships of the line to Aboukir Bay, a wide, shallow anchorage about 19 kilometers east of Alexandria. He was confident in his position. He anchored his ships in a formidable line of battle, a floating wall of cannon stretching across the bay. This line was protected by a peninsula with a fort at its tip and by dangerous shoals that ran along the coast. To make his fortress even more secure, he had the ships connected to each other with thick cables, believing it would be impossible for an enemy to break through. His port side faced the shore, while his starboard side, bristling with guns, faced the open sea, ready to repel any attack. The French admiral believed he had created an unassailable position. He had made a fatal assumption that the British would play by the rules. On the afternoon of August 1st, Nelson's long hunt finally came to an end. His scouts sighted the French fleet. The moment he had dreamed of for months was at hand. Conventional naval wisdom of the time was clear. It was late in the day, the waters were unfamiliar, and a night battle was considered reckless to the point of insanity. A prudent commander would wait for morning. But Nelson was not a prudent commander. He was a predator who had finally cornered his prey. He saw not danger, but a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. As the British fleet approached, Nelson gathered his senior captains, his band of brothers, for a final dinner. These men were a unique weapon in the British arsenal. They had served with Nelson for years, understood his aggressive philosophy, and were trained to think for themselves. Nelson's plan, discussed and refined with his captains during the long weeks of searching, was audacious in its simplicity and brilliance. He would not attack the French line head-on. He would concentrate his entire force on the front section of the French line, overwhelming it with superior numbers before the rear ships could even join the fight. But the true stroke of genius came from Captain Thomas Foley of HMS Goliath. As the British ships bore down on the French, Foley noticed that the lead French ship was anchored with enough room between it and the shoals for a ship to pass. He realized Brueys had made a catastrophic error. He had assumed no one would be mad enough to risk sailing between his fleet and the shore. Foley seized the initiative. He steered his ship into that gap, leading a division of the British fleet down the landward side of the French line. The other division, led by Nelson himself, would attack from the seaward side, as expected. The French were about to be caught in a deadly trap, pounded from both sides simultaneously. The French sailors watched the British approach with a sense of disbelief. Many were ashore, digging wells for fresh water. Admiral Brueys, seeing the British advance, was convinced they were merely taking up position for an attack the next morning. He could not comprehend that Nelson intended to start a major battle with only a few hours of daylight left. This fatal miscalculation gave the British the element of surprise. As HMS Goliath slipped past the lead French ship, the Guerrier, and unleashed a devastating broadside from its unprotected shore-facing side, panic and chaos erupted along the French line. The trap was sprung. One by one, the British ships followed Goliath, anchoring by the stern to keep their broadsides aimed at the enemy. The leading French warships, completely unprepared for an attack from their port side, were systematically battered into submission. Trapped in a vicious crossfire, they were raked with cannonballs from both directions. The sound was apocalyptic, a continuous, deafening roar of cannon, the splintering of massive oak halls, the crackle of fire, and the screams of the wounded. The first 5 ships in the French van were overwhelmed and forced to surrender within 3 hours. The battle's climax, and its most terrifying moment, centered on the French flagship, the magnificent 120-gun L'Orient. It was one of the most powerful warships in the world. As the battle raged into the night, L'Orient found itself engaged by multiple British ships. Around 9 in the evening, a fire broke out on its deck. The flames spread with terrifying speed, climbing the rigging and turning the giant ship into a floating inferno. The British ships nearby directed their fire at the blaze, preventing any attempt to extinguish it. Shortly after 10 o'clock, the fire reached the ship's powder magazine. The result was an explosion of unimaginable force. L'Orient was vaporized in a flash of light that illuminated the entire bay, followed by a thunderous boom that was heard miles away in Alexandria. The battle fell silent for a full 10 minutes as sailors on both sides stared in stunned awe at the horrifying spectacle. Admiral Brueys was killed on his flagship before the explosion. The destruction of L'Orient broke the back of the French fleet and the will of its sailors. Fighting continued sporadically through the night and into the next morning, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. When the sun rose on August 2nd, the scale of Nelson's victory was revealed. It was not just a victory, it was an annihilation. Of the 13 French ships of the line, 11 had been captured or destroyed. Only 2, along with 2 frigates, managed to escape. The British, by contrast, had not lost a single ship. The Battle of the Nile sent shockwaves across Europe. Napoleon's army, the finest in the world, was now stranded. Its lifeline to France had been severed. The campaign in Egypt, which had begun with such promise, was now doomed to failure. The victory re-established British naval supremacy in the Mediterranean and marked a turning point in the long war against revolutionary France. It was the first demonstration of Nelson's doctrine of total annihilation, proving that he was a commander who would not settle for a simple victory when he could achieve the complete destruction of the enemy. This battle was more than just a strategic triumph. It was a testament to the British spirit of calculated aggression, daring innovation, and the refusal to be bound by conventional thinking. Nelson's genius was not just in his audacious plan, but in his trust in his captains, his band of brothers, to think independently and seize the fleeting opportunities of battle, He did not command a fleet of ships, he led a brotherhood of warriors. The lesson of the Nile echoes through history, that fortune favors the brave. It is a timeless reminder that complacency is the ally of defeat, and that victory often belongs to the one who dares to do the impossible. It is a story of how one man's vision and one fleet's courage turned the tide of a war and forged a legend that will never be forgotten. Nelson's stunning victory at the Nile set the stage for Trafalgar and cemented his place as Britain's greatest naval hero. If you found this story of British defiance and genius inspiring, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell for more tales of our nation's indomitable history. But what do you think? Was Nelson's night attack the single most brilliant naval tactic in history, or was the French admiral's overconfidence the bigger factor? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.